Okay, today we're determining the inverse of a function algebraically. So when you get the inverse, don't forget you write it like this. Tells us it's an inverse, okay? So given a function, you can determine the inverse following these steps. So here's an example. So we start with the f of x equals 3x plus 2. We want the inverse. So step 1 is to switch, well, first they switched f of x with y. So that's step 1, okay, right there. Step 2 is switch the x and y variables. Simply do this. Okay, so x is now here, but the third step is you have to solve for y. So we learned how to do that last year. So here are the steps for that. I subtracted the 2 over, I got this, and then I finally divide off by 3, and this is my inverse. And so I write it in inverse form, which is like this. And it's okay to write it, left to right as well. Okay? So that's how you determine the inverse. So I'm going to give you these problems, and I'm going to give you some time. We have a pause button here. So take some time and try to do the inverse of these. Remember your steps, which are right here. And when you're done, come back and stop the pause button and check your answers. Okay, so there's your answers. And if you didn't get them right, circle them and come back at the end of the video to see how they're done. Okay, here's another set of problems from your journal. So go ahead and try these. Push pause. Remember your steps. This time it's on you. Okay, there's the answers for those. Remember to circle them if you didn't get them right so you can get them checked at the end. Okay, this is just asking you to determine the inverse of each function like you've been doing, and then it's asking, is the inverse the function? So I'm going to go ahead and give you the work for those. Here's the first one, and you look at the inverse. Here's the second one. Here's the inverse. And yes, they are both functions because they can be written in slope-intercept form. So that's always a way for you to be able to tell if something is a linear function. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about compositions. A composition of functions is the combination of functions such that the output from one function becomes the input for the next function. And when you get up into Algebra 2 and above, you'll see something like this. H of f of g of x. Something like that. And you have to solve from the inside out. So that's kind of what a composition is. We're only going to talk about simple ones here. This is not in the big ideas, but it is a concept that I want you guys to know and be prepared for as you go up to higher math. So when you take a composition, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the function of the f of g of x. That means the equation for g of x becomes the x of this one. So they did it, they put this step in there, but when I learned it, I just put the step right in there. So that function becomes the x, and then you just simplify. And so the f of g of x equals this. So when you do the opposite one, you're doing the g of f of x, they want you to take the 4x and plug it in here. Remember, it only replaces the x. So the 4x goes there, then you distribute, and this is the g of f of x. Okay, this is when you get really complicated equations, but it's a good skill to know. So this is interesting, using compositions to determine whether functions are inverses of each other. So obviously you could take one equation, find its inverse, take the second equation and find its inverse, and if they match each other, you're good to go. But this is another way, and this is really good. So if I do the f of g of x, so I would take this and plug it in for this x, substitution, and then solve, simplify, I get x. If I do the opposite, where I'm going to take the x or this whole thing, and plug it in to that x. You can see it's right there, taking the place of that x. And then I simplify, and I get x plus 8 minus 8, and the 8's cancel, and I get x. If both of the compositions of the two equations equal x, then they are inverse functions. That's a really cool rule to learn. Okay, so this is just an FYI. It's showing you another way that they write it. So this is just like saying the f of g of x. Okay, and so now we're going to show you how to do this. You have to be very careful. So the f of g of x means I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug it in for that x. So first thing I do is I put a blank for myself, and then I write the equation in there. Then I distribute, and I get this, and then I simplify. So you're just inserting the input formula. Okay, so now I'm going to go over those problems. If you've understood everything so far and you got them all right, you're good to go. But otherwise, I'm going to work out these problems. Okay, so first thing I do is I change this to y equals 4x. Then I switch my x and y. And then I simplify by getting y alone. So 1/4 x equals the f of negative 1x. Over here, change it to a y. And then I'm going to switch them. X equals 3y minus 1. I'm going to add 1 to both sides. I get x plus 1 equals 3y. Divide everything by 3. And this, notice how they wrote it here. So I'm okay if you had written it like this. And but that is the same thing. Okay? Over here, y equals negative 3x plus 2. Switch the x and y. Whoops. Yeah. Subtract 2. Always do the adding and subtracting first. Think of it as reverse PEMDAS. Divide everything by negative 3. And again, they've made it into fraction form. So that's just taking both the x and the negative 2 and putting them over 3. So you get x over negative 3 plus negative 2 over negative 3. And that's how they got the plus 2 over 3 and the negative 1/3 x. Okay. And we're going to change the y equals negative 2x plus 3. And then we're going to switch them. X equals negative 2y plus 3. Subtract 3 from both sides. Divide by 2. Divide by negative 2. And notice this time, they kind of left it in the same format. But, see, now I would have left it in that format, so negative 1/2 x plus 3 over 2. Because now it's in slope-intercept form and I can see that it's a function, but this is also okay. Okay, for this one we have y equals 1/2 x plus 2. Switch the x and y, we get x equals 1/2 y plus 2. Subtract the 2, and here's where you have to be careful. You're going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So we get 2x minus 4 equals y. And that gives you this. I'm not going to show you how to graph them. I figure you know how to do that. But this is the f of x. Starts at, actually they're reversed here. This is the f of x. Oops. Okay. So the f of x is at 2, and I'm going up 1. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. So that's the f of x. And this is the g of x. And that starts with a slope of negative 2. Okay, so this one, we changed it to a y. And then I'm going to switch them. X equals 1/3 y. minus 2/3. Isolate the x, so I'm going to add 2/3 to both sides. X plus 2/3 equals 1/3 y. Again, I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. That gets my y alone, and I get 3x plus 2 because the 3's cancel out, and there's my g of x.